Dumelang. Welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Banyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, is the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill good for you, for Eskom, for municipalities and the private players? The Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, is hoping that the President can sign it into law before elections next week. But what does it mean for the municipalities' authority to distribute and trade electricity and their ability to raise revenue around this? What does it mean for the future price of electricity, and what does it mean in terms of reliability in energy supply? The Minister of Electricity faces the nation tonight. We'll also hear from James Mackay, who is the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. And then later, as we get closer and closer to elections, political parties are revving up their campaigns, including the Freedom Front Plus and the ACDP. The leaders of both parties join me tonight to discuss their campaigns, their prospects in these elections, and their promises for the electorate. But first, my comment. So President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to sign the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill into law. Well, the Minister of Electricity is hoping that the President can sign it before elections next week. But that's if he will remember where his pen is, because it disappeared for a few months when the NHI bill was on his table until, of course, 3 weeks before elections. That's when he found the pen. Now this bill will bring about significant reforms in the energy sector. It will have far-reaching implications for the future structure and operations of the electricity supply industry. The Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, explained the implications of this bill.
What does it mean? So it means a number of things. It establishes two main principles of how you are going to deal with the new generators, new players in the ecosystem. It introduces the principles of equity and fairness on how these players are able to access the grid.
As he says, what's good about the bill is that it will formalize measures to open the market for competitive electricity trading. But other organizations like the South African Local Government Association have objected to the bill in its current form, saying it's unconstitutional because it takes away the municipalities' executive powers in electricity distribution. So they argue that it significantly reduces the municipalities' authority to distribute and trade electricity, which then undermines their ability to raise revenue. Even Labour Federation, SAFTU, objected to the bill.
The South African Federation of Trade Unions is against this bill because it introduced risk-return oriented tariff, which in our view, as I've explained, will guarantee profits. But in guaranteeing profits, it means that it may actually lead to the prices of electricity increasing and thus increasing energy poverty. And in the context of liberalizing the energy market, we are concerned because it would change the ownership structure in the energy generation division.
Now, with all that the minister says and what Salga and SAFTU say, I would imagine that what you care about is how this bill affects you, right? Will it lead to reliable electricity supply? Well, government believes it will, because the more players we have in the sector means there's more generation capacity. So that's a tick. But also, secondly, what impact will this have on the price of electricity? The bill suggests that this move will probably see the lowest cost pricing available in the market, because you'll get the most competitive price on the day and not take what Eskom wants and is approved by NESA, which is another tick. So it looks like it's good on paper. So what do you think of the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill? That's the question we're asking you tonight. What do you want it to address for you? Are you happy with what it's aimed at addressing? You can send us a voice note on 078 459 1897. Alternatively, send us an X at Face the Nation SABC. After the break, we sit down with the Electricity Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. Stay with us. Welcome back. Electricity Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa expects President Cyril Ramaphosa to at least sign the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill into law before elections. Parliament passed the proposed law that will officially end Eskom's 100-year electricity monopoly. Now, the bill has far-reaching implications for the future and structure and operations for the electricity supply industry. Ramokgopa says this bill will formalize measures to open the market for competitive electricity trading. But some organizations like SALGA are threatening to take the bill to court, saying it's unconstitutional. Joining us now for a conversation on this and an update on the electricity generation and the grid is the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. Thank you for sitting down with us. Welcome to Face the Nation.
Thank you very much, Clement, and good evening to the viewers at home.
So my understanding is that one of the primary interventions that this bill introduces is making it easier to produce and sell electricity in South Africa. How will this change the current electricity distribution structure?
Well, it's significant. I mean, the impact is of seismic proportions because, as you have mentioned earlier on in your inset, you are undermining Eskom 100-year-old monopoly. And in fact, you are de-risking energy generation in the country because I think the experience we've had in the recent past is that you have concentrated the generation into one entity. And when that entity fails for reasons that have been documented at Zondo, some of the policy missteps, perhaps issues of management, then the country is exposed. So what the Act does is to ensure that you've got new players on the generation side. And the benefits are multifold, but just to mention a few. The first one is that it introduces competition, because I think there'll be more players in that space. And then with competition comes greater levels of technology adoption, because competitors really want to make sure that they come in at the least cost possible, so that they are able to attract the off-takers and they are able to generate the kind of income that they had set for themselves as targets. And with that introduction of multiple players and the investment in technology and the realization of efficiencies, you are likely going to see a significant drop in prices. And that can only augur well for the end consumer. So the point is that Eskom doesn't enjoy that monopoly anymore, but nothing stops Eskom from participating in that space. And that's why we make the point that Eskom very soon will be announcing its foray into new generation. Outside your mainstream, your nuclear issues of hydro, pump storage, I think Eskom is also going to participate on the renewable side. Because what has been the case hitherto is that Eskom has been just an off-taker through the bid windows. Yeah. I think Eskom can be able to design bespoke financing instruments, partner with the private players, because Eskom doesn't have the balance sheet to support the kind of capital investment that is required. And then over time, that asset then reverts back to Eskom. So that's how the space will be reconfigured on the generation side.
Speaking of the balance sheet, because my next question was going to be, what's the impact on Eskom's balance sheet? I mean, if you break away the 100-year-old monopoly, at some point, Eskom now has to compete. There may be an impact on the balance sheet. How do you then patch up that gap? Is it
Yes,
patched?
I mean, it's an excellent question. So the point I was making, and I think that's the approach of the board, is that bring on the competition. What that does is that if Eskom was complacent, knowing that they are the only player, so there's very little investment in technology, advancing, if you like, new solutions on how you offer electricity. And really the biggest casualty is the end consumer, because the price of energy generation and production is not benefiting from investments in technology. But what we also know is that the Eskom balance sheet is constrained. So that's why it's important that they design instruments that helps them to tap into the liquidity of the private sector, private sector brings that money. What the advantage that Eskom has ahead of these other players is that it's got the enormous experience on generation. Secondly, is that it's sitting on significant assets. What are those assets? Where they are in much older power stations, which power station over a passage of time, invariably they'll have to be retired. They own vast pieces of land. And then they've got the grid connection. And then you can repurpose that infrastructure. So they've got a head start, and they also have the inside track. The one area where they are lacking is around the financing.
Yeah.
So I think they already have, if you like, a skin in the game, and they are able to enter into that discussion with the private sector at a more advanced stage. And remember the point I want to emphasize, you are not privatizing from an Eskom point of view, those assets. It's just designing that instrument to allow for capital to come into, to be deployed into Eskom, and over a period of time, Eskom then will have ownership of those assets. But the more competition you have is going to force Eskom to think creatively. And the team under Dr. Mteto, the chair of the board, Dan Marokane and Bekin Ngumala, they're already thinking around those. In fact, it's some degree of application that has happened over time. Whether you introduce new players or not, Eskom was going to go that route so that we give the benefit to the end consumer.
So the viewers, people watching us tonight are thinking, what's in it for me? And what they care most about is the price of electricity, which has been high in recent times. You said it's going to have an impact, this bill, on the price of electricity. It can significantly reduce it. But how is that pricing then going to be regulated? What's the role of NERSA?
Well, NERSA is not displaced as a player in that price determination. So that's one. So NERSA is still a player in that space. I think the benefits in the main are twofold. The first one is guaranteed energy supply. So essentially, I'm not relying on one source. If that source have got major problem, then it means that I'm likely going to be the casualty, which has been the situation we've been experiencing in the recent past. So we are de-risking that space. And the second one is because we've got multiple players. So you've got the choice, if you are an energy-intensive user, to choose who's going to be your supplier. So you can negotiate, essentially move from one generator to the other. And the one that guarantees you the best price, that's where you're going to contract. And of course, also extends to the household level. Just to say also at the level of municipalities, there are some municipalities that are thinking creatively about this situation. Let me give you a typical example with eThekwini, what the mayor there has done, Mayor Kaunda and the leadership of eThekwini. They are the first municipality to approach this minister and say that we want a ministerial determination. Essentially, they want to be generators of energy because they've seen the opportunities on the reforms on the generation side. They could foresee what the era was going to do. It has opened up that space. There is nothing that says that municipalities can't self-generate. So what they will do, 400 megawatts, we're waiting for NERSA concurrence. So they are going to be the generators of energy. So if they've seen this opportunity, so as opposed to thinking downstream the value chain of how best can I add a surcharge on reticulation, they think of it differently and say I can also be a generator of electricity.
The argument Salga makes is that they are no longer going to be the executive authority for electricity distribution in the area of jurisdiction. Do you agree with the fact that this will somehow going to undermine their ability to raise revenue when you reduce the municipality's authority to distribute and trade electricity?
No, they are absolutely correct. But let's also examine what is the prevailing situation as I speak to you. There are municipalities that have relinquished that responsibility and given it to Eskom. And in fact, outside your metros, I think Eskom is the biggest on the reticulation side. So that's the first part. So I'm just saying, even outside the president signing the bill, you already have those conditions prevailing. And then the second one, they are absolutely correct. So if you only think of it in a one-dimensional view, to say that I'm being denied the ability to reticulate and therefore I can't add a surcharge and improve my revenue generating ability and reinvest this money into other social infrastructure. You can think of it differently and not seeing yourself as a downstream player. You can be an upstream player and participate in the generation of new capacity. One of the things that we are doing, working with COGTA, Minister Nkadimeng has assigned that responsibility to DM Tau, is to see how best we can protect the financial interest of municipalities.
Yeah.
Because even outside the bill, at the rate at which the reforms were happening, the energy-intensive users are the first one to look for other options of new generating capacity. So municipalities are left with two clients, consumers, categories of consumers. The first one is what I call the delinquent one. So it's some people who can pay but choose not to pay. And then the second one is people who genuinely can afford. And of course, there's a basket of social incentives that is offered to those households. So essentially, we have eroded the revenue base of municipalities. So we're working on a solution that makes it possible for municipalities to be players on the generation side.
But they have to think creatively now.
But we're assisting them because we can have distributed generation. By that I mean it's localized generation. And what you are doing, you are going to cut the cost of reticulating, because you are not reticulating long distances. You are reticulating short distances. You are going to reduce what you call technical losses. And then you are providing a significantly cheaper electricity. So if you like, you are a local ESCOM on the generation side. You are able to earn that revenue. You are able to configure a reticulation in the manner that you can still earn revenue downstream, as opposed to lamenting what the situation is. But yes, they are perfectly correct. If you think of municipalities just on the reticulation side, absolutely correct. But if you have to rethink holistically, you'll see that there are opportunities that are being created for municipalities to participate in that space.
Do they have the infrastructure and the resources to participate in that way?
No, absolutely not. So the resources in this instance is twofold. Is the money, the capital that is required.
Which they don't have.
Yes, and secondly, some of the municipalities outside the metros, it's also the skills to design that. And that's why we try to setting up a project management office, the Minister of COGTA, to ensure that we are able to aggregate the skills there so that they are able to help municipalities to go this route. So essentially they opt in, they raise their hands and say, I want to opt into that dispensation. And in that way, you are able to illustrate a matrix that suggests that you are able to expand your revenue base. So don't think of it contracting, because you are entering a dispensation that is unavoidable. So it's important that you are positioning yourself to play in that space.
Why don't municipalities understand what you're explaining to me now? Why are you not still seeing eye to eye? Because SALGA is now trying to petition the president not to sign the bill. They're threatening to even approach the Constitutional Court.
Well, we've been having those conversations for a considerable amount of time. And that's why the placement of that conversation is at SALGA, at the COGTA level, because they're the ones who are able to rally, if you like, SALGA around the table. I'm more than confident that we'll find each other. I mean, I can give you another example. In Buffalo, working with Mayor Fark, with a progressive about her thinking, trying to protect the investments there by Mercedes-Benz. We know that once we have load shedding, it undermines their competitiveness and also their reliability as a manufacturing house. So what they wanted to do is that the municipality there then partners with an IPP that is reputable, and then you've got a credible off-taker, because the counterparty risk is important. Who is committing to buy from you? Can this person meet his or her obligation? It's a Mercedes, so we know it's a brand that is reputable. It's an IPP, then they get to financial close, and then they reticulate using their municipal infrastructure. And over a passage of time, that asset that the IPP has built then reverts back to Buffalo. Then Buffalo then is a generator of electricity going into the future, and they are able to expand its capacity to even assist the poor and also just assist the growth of demand in that area.
All right, let's talk about the Energy Action Plan. You have managed to stabilize power, I think, for almost 2 months now. The last I checked, a few days ago, in fact, you had passed the 50-day mark of load shedding free days. I think this is the longest period probably since 2019. What do you attribute that to?
Well, it's a concerted effort. First is the soft issues that we understate. I think leadership is important. I mean, the appointment of Dr. Mteto as the chair of the board and the men and women that are serving the board, exceptional quality of men and women with enormous experience in this space. All that they have to offer is their expertise to help the country to turn the situation around. And they will go further to make inspired appointments themselves. From the ranks of ESCOM, someone with exceptionally great track record, comes with great reputation and pedigree, Mr. Begin Ngumane, to head generation. And much later they appoint Mr. Den Marokan. And what do? they introduce performance related incentives. That lifts the morale of the workers, stabilize the leadership at the power station. The second one is for when we identified 6 problematic power stations that were responsible for 70% of the losses. So instead of doing everything, you apply what in science we call the Pareto principle, 20% effort, 80% return. What are we seeing now? 3 of those power stations have graduated from being problematic. They are some of the best performers as I speak to you now. And as a result of that, we have anchored this recovery on the back of aggressive planned maintenance. When we received that fiscal support of 254 billion, we then, the ESCOM team went and said, how best are we going to take these units out? And we accepted that there's inherent risk. The greater the amount of megawatts you take out, the greater the risk that if there's a cluster of units failing, you have to intensify load shedding. And that's why in December, we reached 18% of our total generation capacity went into planned maintenance. Guess what? All these units are coming into play as we prepare for winter, and that's why you are seeing the kind of improvement.
What's the plan for winter? I mean, as we approach, you're going to have to meet the growing energy demand. Do you have the plan? Can South Africans expect these positive, the positive sweep to continue even during winter? Yes, remember that the return of the units is orchestrated to coincide with the winter. So during periods of low demand, December and early parts of January, we took out 9,000 megawatts. Now when we go into winter, what will be into planned maintenance will be 3,000 megawatts. So essentially the system has got an additional 6,000 megawatts to meet the challenges of winter. So we're confident. So we're not expecting high stages of load shedding during winter? ESCOM went out and did the winter outlook. The best case scenario said if we lose 14,000 megawatts, we won't have a load shedding. At all? Guess what? Now as I speak to you, the month of April and what is of May now, that 14,000 megawatts is about 12,000 megawatts. Okay. So we're 2,000 better than what ESCOM had projected. Given the amount of work that you've done so far, when do you expect this to be a thing of the past? Well, we do expect, for an example, there's 3 units that are going to come in September and October. The Kubek unit number 2, 980 megawatts. Kusile unit number 6, 800 megawatts. Midupi unit number 4, 800 megawatts. There alone, we are talking about 2,500 megawatts of additional capacity. We know on the incentive side, on the demand side, a rooftop solar solution increased from 2022 June to 23 June by about 2,000 megawatts to 4,300. I'm confident, but by the end of this calendar year, that number will be sitting at 6,000 megawatts. And then there's a lot of new generating capacity from private sector that is coming on stream. And you're going to find that the generation side is not just the 2,500 megawatts only from ESCOM, it's also private sector generation. So when does it become a thing of the past? I will come to your studio and tell you, but the point I'm telling you is that we'll be in a much, much better place when you go towards the end of the year. You know, I don't want to make absolute statements because I really don't want to mislead the South African public. The trend line is positive. Once we are able to account for when that new generation from private sector is on stream and we are able to confirm it, which is the exercise we are doing with private sector, I'll say with a degree of authority that this thing is fully behind us. But you are really going to see a picture that you are seeing now is likely going to be sustained going into the future. All right, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, thank you so much for making time for us. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you very much. Oh, thanks. Thank you. All right, let's continue this conversation with James McKay, who is the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. James, thank you so much for joining us this evening. So this bill essentially allows our country to do what most of the world has really done for the longest time, liberalizing the energy sector. What does it mean for the energy security for South Africa?
No, thanks. Good evening, Bungiwe. I hope I'm audible. Wi-Fi doesn't seem to be great this evening. The ERA Amendment Bill really signifies increasing competition, increasing transparency, increasing efficiency. So it really is in our interest. But I think we've got to recognize that the ERA bill sets out the process and the parameters for developing this market that we're going to move to, the multi-market that everyone talks about. But it's not the market. Okay, so the ERA bill as it stands, I think, is directionally correct. It's in line with the international best practice. A lot of the criticism that, says what if and the conspiracy theory that the minister could or might, we've got to move through the development. This is not the market yet. So I think, it's very good where we're at the moment, but we're in this transition and we need to move forward.
Yeah. SALGA is challenging this bill in its current form. How does it affect municipalities' responsibilities in the distribution of electricity? I don't know if you heard the minister, but he says they have to start thinking creatively around even this energy sector and start having resources and infrastructure. But he does admit if the bill would come and there are no changes that are made at municipal level, it would, in fact, have an impact on their revenue collection.
I agree with the minister. I think that we've got to just step back and realize we're in the biggest sort of transition in our energy sector and for our economy. For the next 10 years, this will be the biggest capital investment this country has ever had to undertake. So there are many areas and risks that not just the municipalities will face, but in many other areas. Now, if we could step back, we spoke a little bit about the Energy Action Plan, and the partnership between business and government at the moment is very much focused on the Energy Action Plan and the role of NECOM in trying to work through these challenges in the detail in order to make this transition fair, equitable, and bring everyone along. I agree with the minister, though, that the municipal reform is one area that really has lagged, and there are changes proposed in the ERA bill which impacts the municipalities' kind of positioning or rights around revenue reticulation. So I think it's very important we recognize that we shouldn't sweep it under the carpet at all. But importantly, there is a very clear process to develop the market. We're currently in sort of window one of engagement, which is really under Eskom. It's through the market operator. It's developing the market codes. All parties are invited and collaborate very actively and very robustly with Eskom. That period, we currently in now ends in October. We then open a new period or window of engagement, and that is through a NERSA public engagement. And that process then continues for another 5 or 6 months. There are further 2 oversight and advisory bodies that need to be set up, which is outlined under the regulation or under the amendments, in order to provide oversight, look at an ongoing review process, look at market code advisory, and look at compliance. Mm-hmm. So there is a long road of open engagement, robust engagement, where we need to deal with not only kind of the municipality and SALGA's concerns, but there are other concerns as well, which have been floated, I think, generally in the media. But the way to deal with this is through the engagement, not through the courts. Yeah.
Well, let's wait and see if the president perhaps also responds to them, because they've written to him. They're trying to get him to pause on signing that bill. What are the implications of this bill on Eskom's balance sheet? Because if you've been having a monopoly on energy distribution for 100 years and now you have to enter this competitive space, the consequence that's expected there is that the balance sheet may be affected unless you start thinking creatively around how you compete as well in that space.
Yes, Clement. We must remember that this market reform is a very important part, but it's not the only part of the energy transition that we're going through. And typically, internationally, it's understood the utility death spiral is where the old school sort of centralized integrated utility has to break itself up and move into a competitive environment which is decentralized, distributed, and highly digitized. So the ERA amendment doesn't in itself impact or promote the sort of the utility death spiral. It is part of the journey, and that is the transition that we have to make. And we have to optimize that transition from a South Africa context that is not based on international. We have to learn from international, but we've got to do it in a way that optimizes the South African context, our current assets, we know very coal intensive, we've had load shedding, we're recovering from that. How do we transition in a way that is sustainable? Because that is the kind of one of the priorities of the Energy Action Plan, which was end load shedding, build a lot of new generation, and then reform the energy sector for success and sustainability.
Yeah. James McKay, CEO of Energy Council of South Africa, thank you so much for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. After the break, the leaders of the Freedom Front Plus and the ACDP. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, political parties are revving up their campaigns, including the Freedom Front Plus and the ACDP. We're just 5 days before the polls, and the leaders of both parties are joining us tonight on Face the Nation to discuss their campaigns, their prospects in these elections, and of course their promises to you as the electorate. So joining us tonight, Dr. Pieter Groenewald in studio with us. Thank you so much for making time. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
We also joined by Reverend Kenneth Moeshwe, who is the leader of the ACDP. Reverend Moeshwe, thank you so much for also joining us tonight. Good evening.
Good evening to you and to all the listeners and viewers.
Let's just get straight into it, Dr. Groenewald. As the Freedom Front Plus, what are you promising the electorate? So you launched your election manifesto. What's in there that's convinces the electorate that they must give you a chance?
Yeah, we promise them nothing because politicians must stop making promises which they know they cannot fulfill. But what we say to the electorate is that the biggest threat to South Africa is unemployment. And to ensure that we create jobs, we say that we must ensure that the economy grow. And then we come forward with certain plans, what to do to get the economy to grow. And the moment that happens, then you are creating jobs. So I'm not promising 2 million jobs. What we say we must do to get the economy growing faster is firstly, let's go to electricity. And we have, for instance, the proposal to say that electricity and the theft of electricity must be criminalized. At the moment it is not. Then we also say, when you go to municipalities, the monies paid for the services, when it comes to electricity and also water, it must be ring-fenced. And the municipalities must first pay the bill with the service provider before you can use that other money for further operations in the municipality. We also say that we must curb the powers of the unions. They have too much power. We also say that the infrastructure, and it goes down to the level of municipalities again, must be addressed properly because they don't do the job. I mean, you can't expect someone to start a business, but when it comes to the roads and the supply of electricity or water are creating problems. Therefore, we say those are matters that must have a priority to attend to make it conducive for potential investors from overseas as well as local investors to expand their businesses.
In a capital system that we have experienced over the years, are you not worried about the implications of you curbing the powers of the unions and how that can lead to the exploitation of workers?
No. You must remember there must always be a balance between the interests of the employers and the employees. We believe in that. But they have too much power in this sense. We say, if they have an illegal strike, for instance, then the union must pay the damages. If they have a march and there are damages, then the union must be held responsible for that. That is what we mean. I mean, you have a situation where certain employees, it's just almost impossible to get rid of them if they did something wrong or when they do not perform well. Therefore, we have to look at that.
All right. Reverend Mishwe, what is your selling point as the ACDP?
Well, the ACDP says we can ensure that the climate is conducive for job creation. But the number one thing that should be done is to eradicate crime in South Africa. We know that when crime levels are as high as we have in our country, potential investors will not come to invest because their lives might be endangered, their properties might be endangered. As you know that in South Africa, when people and some workers are not happy with what is happening with the business or with transport, people find it easy to destroy property and to touch whatever they blame for their inconveniences. You have workers who go to work using trains, burn down coaches. Those who use buses, burn down buses, touch buses. Why? Because they are late at work. So we are saying the number one thing that should be done before we think about growing the economy, we should think about removing criminality, dealing with the criminals, because our present government is very soft on crime, on dealing with criminals. Our current government allows criminals even to target the police stations, to attack the police in their stronghold, a police station. So when you are in a country where criminals are not afraid of the arm of the law, are not afraid of punishment, then you are going to have what we have in South Africa today. And as a result, there will be no unemployment that will take a nosedive. So the most important thing is the arm of the law must be feared by the criminals because they punish. They punish severely. So in South Africa, for as long as they talk about the rights of criminals, punishing them will be an afterthought. But the ACDP says, let's first ensure that law-abiding citizens are living without fear in their streets, in their homes. They know that they have a government that will protect them. But when you have a government that is failing in their basic responsibility, which is to ensure that citizens are living without fear of being attacked, of being raped, or so on, then we are in trouble. So the ACDP says, let's start by eradicating crime. If you eradicate crime, you are making the atmosphere conducive for job creation. That's where it starts. And once job creation is happening, job creation because the atmosphere is conducive, then people who want to invest will be attracted to this place that they will feel safe in. Our space of creating jobs or growing the economy is not safe at this stage. That is why growth in the economy is very, very minimal because of the element of fear, which we ACDP want to transfer it to the criminals.
All right, Dr. Groenewald, what is your party's position on issues like employment equity? Do you believe in legislation that helps address the injustices of the past and level the playing field between black and white South Africans?
Well, we are on record that we say that we are against black economic empowerment and affirmative action. We said from the start, in the 90s, when those legislation were proposed in Parliament, that it is going to ruin the economy. And that's exactly what happened. For instance, if you take black economic empowerment, I say it is black elite enrichment, because it's only the politically connected people who get the contracts. And the other day there was a research study done by the Institute for Race Relations, and it found that 85% of specifically black people in South Africa did not benefit in any way from black economic empowerment. We say that we should look at skills transfer, that when there are upcoming business people, that there can be sort of mentorships where the skills can be transferred to make a success. And it has been proved, specifically when it came to land reform, when there was a lot of failures. They started with the mentorship with farmers, and that actually ensured food security on the one hand, and skills transfer to the upcoming black farmers. Affirmative action, we say that we only believe in merit. If you go and look, for instance, at our universities, you will find that more than 3 times more black students are graduating at our universities than white people. And you go and ask them, they don't want an affirmative position. They want to be in a position because of merit. And that's why the Freedom Front Plus say, that's what we need also to build the economy. And can I say, unfortunately, because of corruption, black economic empowerment and affirmative action in South Africa became a smokescreen to ensure that corruption takes place. And I'm supported by many political scientists, black scientists, political scientists also agree, and people in the business field that say that the time for black economic empowerment, affirmative action is gone. We must stop that.
Yeah, and of course, there have not been successful implementations of black economic empowerment. We can argue about the successes and the failures. But how do you understand affirmative action? Because you talk about merit and how people want to be appointed on merit. My understanding of affirmative action is that it is still merit-based. It just means as a business, you are being intentional about who you are appointing, because we're in a country where the system is skewed. When you look at the report by the Labour Department, which I study every year, the the Employment Equity Commission, they tell you that over 60%, for instance, of roles in big business, in corporate South Africa, are occupied by white males. It's not normal in a country like ours, because females, either white or black, need to be there. Black South Africans who've got the same qualifications and have got merit need to be appointed into these positions. And corporate South Africa most times is not interested to transform. Are you comfortable as the Freedom Front Plus with the system where there's white males that are occupying positions when in fact the companies could be deliberate in their transformation to ensure there are people also who qualify, white females, black females, also black males who can occupy those positions?
Yeah. Let me first say, I have no problem if they occupy people of all races. But what we say is that they must take the best candidate. And then it doesn't matter whether it's a white person, a brown person, a black person, an Indian person, then that person must be appointed. It's the same with women appointments. The best candidate must be appointed. The Freedom Front Plus, for instance, have 2 female members of parliament. They're not there because of the fact that they are women. They went through the whole process as all the other candidates. They ended high up on the list on merit, and they are in those positions because of merit. Therefore, we say that there shouldn't be color when it comes to qualifications.
What must happen if there's a black and white person who've got the same qualification, equally skilled?
Well, if it's equally skilled, then it depends on that specific company, because there may be some other factors. You must remember, many companies, for instance, want certain tests to be made. Look at personalities for that specific business, what they have. And I don't think that you will get to a situation if you go through the whole criteria every time that there are, say, for instance, a black or a white that have exactly the same. Then they must make their choice. But if you say that they must then take the black candidate, then it's discrimination against the white candidate.
But that's because during apartheid, black people were not even allowed into those opportunities, and because of that system, we're in a situation where white people occupy most of the position.
Yeah.
So how do you continue when the playing field is not level? It's skewed like this.
Yeah.
So if you say they must not take black because it's discriminatory, which the Constitution, by the way, allows for discrimination on the basis of redressing the injustices of the past, then you're continuing the system that existed
I hear what
during
you say.
apartheid.
Let me answer. Firstly, you say the Constitution allows for discrimination. So actually,
only if it's based on redress
doesn't matter.
of the injustices of the past.
Doesn't matter. It allows discrimination. That's a problem with the Constitution. But firstly, I also want to say that you must remember that it's 30 years after 1994. Where are we now? And we must stop trying to fight for a better past. We must now start fighting for a better future. and for the future. And I'm coming back to what I said, we must get the economy to grow.
Okay.
Then we say, let's get the best people to do the job.
Reverend Mishwe, on affirmative action, what's your position as the ACDP?
Since 1994, the ACDP supported affirmative action to redress the injustices of the past. But we put a ceiling. We said we cannot have affirmative action for the next 100 years. We put a ceiling of 25 years because we knew that people that were born in 1994 will have time to grow, will have time to go to university and to graduate. All right. Now we are 30 years into the new democracy. The problem is there are a number of times when even in America, I have black friends in America who even after 100 years, they still believe colonialism. And I'm saying, and I'm speaking as a black man, Clement, I'm speaking as a black man, we must come to a stage where we outgrow blaming the past. While we are affected by the past, it is a fact, but we cannot blame the past forever. Government currently is perpetuating the injustices of the past. When government allows children to pass with a 30% mark, when are those children going to come to a stage where they can compare with the best in the world? So government is deliberately, with the education system, keeping our people uninformed, keeping our young people not fit to be accepted straight into university after passing matric. They have to go through bridging courses because they are being given inferior education. If we are serious with what has been happening in the past and we want to improve our children so that they can compete with white children, Indian children, colored children, then we must ensure that they get the best education. I will not agree, and the ACDP does not agree, that we can blame and we want to have affirmative action for the next 100 years. When are you going to stop it? When are you going to say, now let's look at people with merit? For as long as government allows children to pass and to be promoted to the next grade with only 30% knowledge they have, then definitely we are taking our country backwards. And the ACDP is saying, starting with education, no child should be promoted to the next grade until they are able to get 50% or more of the knowledge of the subject that they have learned. And when that is done, then we are leveling the playing field. But for as long as you say children that are getting only 30% pass mark and children who cannot even express themselves in English should be promoted to another level. Children who cannot do mathematics, they are failing mathematics, rather than focusing on getting our children the best education. We give them a lousy education, and the education that will make them to forever remain at the bottom until we increase the pass mark and until we get a better system for our children. We are perpetuating the unacceptable situation we are having in our country. And now when we talk about when we want to have new investments in the country, unfortunately, if we ask the question, where will those investments come from? We are creating a mentality of always going out there to get a job rather than to start a business, because we are not teaching our children, giving them entrepreneurial skills. So they think, when I graduate, who is going to employ me? Rather than say, I'm going to start a business. My parents are going to start a business. Government will also give me an initiative or help me with a sponsorship so that I can start a business. Let's give our children and our people confidence that they can do things for themselves rather than expect others to start businesses and give us good positions.
All right. Dr. Groenewald, do you believe, as the Freedom Front Plus, in universal healthcare?
Well, it depends what you mean by that. I mean, we're against the national health insurance because we say that it's not going to enhance better health care. We say, yes, there must be universal health care. But the problem at this moment is because of poor management of our health services. You go to hospitals, you ask for the hospital manager. You're very lucky if you find the person there. There are hospitals, there's enough money, but there's a problem with the service of health services. You have clinics, and I've visited some of those clinics, where old women, black women, they had to leave their place at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. They get there at the clinic, then they have to stay and wait in a queue. Then by 3, 4 o'clock, they tell them, so come tomorrow. And tomorrow comes, and then another tomorrow comes. We also submitted a comprehensive report on the poor conditions in our public hospitals, the Freedom Front Plus. And it is really scary to see what the conditions are. And those are conditions that's not going to be, can I say, solved with more money. It's only going to be solved off when the people, the healthcare people, are really, can I say, focused and dedicated to ensure good health services. Then we say, with the private sector, yes, they must see how they can take hands to try and improve health services, but not by the National Health Insurance Act, what they are going to do now, because we all know that was only an election gimmick from the government, and they know it's not going to work in practice. In fact, we're going to get a situation where medical doctors are going to leave South Africa, because we must remember there are certain clauses in that act that is really detrimental to practitioners in the health service department.
Yeah. Reverend Mishra, your position on the National Health Insurance?
NHI in its current form will not make services easily available to all South Africans. People who are saying that are politicians who just want votes. There are medical doctors in South Africa who are saying it will not work. Why? Because firstly, there is no money for it. Number two, you do not have doctors. You do not have health workers. How are you going to run such a system when you don't have money, when you don't have doctors, when you don't have health workers, you don't have nurses? Who's going to ensure that this free health care that is being spoken about in any hospital you want, any private hospital you want, you can just walk in there and say, it is my right to get services here, when there is no medication? Okay? When there is no medication in hospitals and in clinics, and there are no workers in hospitals and in clinics, and the current ones that you have are going to leave the country. They are going to run away because they know it will be impossible. Workload is going to be increased on them because of shortage of staff. So politicians in South Africa are not honest, they are not truthful, they are not concerned about the health and welfare of the people. They just want votes. And after getting the votes for the next 5 years, they are going to forget the people suffering, and they are going to look at what next to bring, so that the people can think we care. It is not free services that are saying to the public, government cares. It is quality services. Quality services. On paper, you'll be told everything is free, but what do you get out of what is called free? What do you get out of it? So NHI, in its present form, will not work. Government was unfortunate, or the ANC was not truthful in running away from answering the question, where are you going to find money? They can't even pay their own doctors. Doctors are protesting, doctors are striking because they cannot be employed, and when we ask why, they say there is no money. So if there is no money to pay the current doctors and nurses, there is no money, where are you going to get money to pay millions, more than 60 million South Africans, and give them free healthcare? It's not going to work. It's a lie. It's a deception as far as we are concerned. It's the ACDP.
Reverend Mishra, Dr. Groenewald, I appreciate your time on Face the Nation tonight. And thanks to you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.